evacuated, you're required to vacate the building by the rear entrance and gather in the breezeway between the library and art gallery buildings. This is council's designated emergency muster point. Under no circumstances is anyone permitted to re-enter the building until the all clear has been given by a deemed safe or authorised personnel. In the event of an evacuation, a member of council staff will assist any person present with a disability to vacate the building. Item 1.1, apologies of absence. Do we have any?
No apologies have been received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Go on to item 1. People online, can you just mute yourself for the time being, please? This council is being live streamed and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you'll be live streamed and recorded. Please ensure that if there are no apologies, so we don't online. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just want to confirm that we have several councillors online. We have Councillor Deputy Mayor Greenhalgh, I have Councillor McDonald, and do we have Councillor Wheaton? I know he's trying to get in. And Peterson.
Yes, Peterson.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm also working and on call, so I'll do my best to stay for as much as I can. But if I need to leave, I will have to.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any? Is Councillor Whitten there?
He's not, but he did send an email.
He did send an email.
Okay. All right. If he comes in late, we'll acknowledge that. Can I have a mover and a seconder that those? Yep. Moved by Councillor Ruddy, seconded by Councillor Steadman, that these online attendances be recorded. This council is being live. All in favour? Carried. This council is being live streamed and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to be live streamed and recorded. Please ensure that if and when you speak at the council meeting, that you ensure that you are respectful to others and use appropriate language at all times. Orange City Council accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of the meeting. A recording of the council meeting will be made available for administrative purposes. Acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of the land. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, both past, present of the Wiradjuri Nation, and extend respects to other Aboriginal and all other people here with us today. Do we have any conflicts of interest? Item 1.4. Councillor McDonald. You declared last time.
Yes, I'm a member of the Western Region Planning Panel, so I'm literally just jumping on to declare my interest, and I'll leave the meeting and I won't come back.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have a less significant, less pecuniary interest. The property owner is the employer of my son, but it has nothing to do with the building, as it's he's on a drilling rig. But I will be staying in the room.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Mallow.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'll declare the same interest as when we considered the original item, both less than significant, non-pecuniary interests. I'm a member of Echo Orange who made a submission on the proposal, but I wasn't involved in the submission, and Echo has no interest in the outcome directly beyond their values, which I share, and I am a member of the Central West Renewable Energy Co-op, which is involved in another project that is owned by that is being developed by the same applicant, EDPR Australia, but I have no connection to this proposed project or to EDPR directly. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Just note that Councillor Whitney is now with us. Okay, any other conflicts? All right, we'll move on. The council meeting will now be adjourned for the conduct of open forum. When addressing the council, speakers at public forums must comply with the Code of Meeting Practice and all other relevant council codes, policies and procedures. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breach of the council's code of conduct, or making other potential defamatory statements. I will ask that you be respectful of this chamber and all here with us today. We have 5 registered speakers. You'll be permitted 5 minutes speaking time. A warning bell will sound after 4 minutes. Councillors, our first speaker is addressing item 2.1, development application DA 771/2024 in brackets 140 Katie Road, Springside. And it's Mr. Tony McPaul. Would you like to come up to the electorate, please, sir? Before you start, Mr. McPaul, I'll just introduce the councillors to you. I have Councillor Power here. Beside him is Councillor Mallard. To go across, I've got Councillor Ruddy, Councillor Steadman, Councillor Judge, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Kinghorn. Online, I have Councillor McDonald, Deputy Mayor Councillor Greenhalgh, Councillor Whitten, and also Councillor Peterson. So you have 5 minutes when you'd like to start.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I will do my absolute best to stick within your 5 minutes, but I do have a lot of very relevant information that I think council will be very interested in. I've written it down because my memory is getting worse as I get older, and I figured probably reading it out was the best way to go. So I spoke at the last council meeting and I watched the debate that took place at that council meeting on the solar farm at 140 Cadia Road. You were discussing the exact same subject again today. Councillors raised a number of very valid points during their discussion last week. I've captured some of those points, but not every single one. So some of those points included what's in it for Orange, what powers council have under the planning laws, project buffer zones were discussed, soil classification on the project site, the proposed vegetation screening was discussed, too close to Orange. Consultation was non-existent, in the words of one of the councils, appalling in relation to this project. Developers must do better, adopt best practice. Large-scale solar farm guideline is not a requirement, but is highly recommended. Council does not have grounds to oppose this development, and more. I'd like to point out to you that you actually do have grounds to oppose this project or this development application in your submission to the Regional Planning Panel. And I think you've got more than one ground, but one particular ground is the visual screening is mentioned numerous times in the Statement of Environmental Effects as mitigation for the impacts created by the development. Here's one of the reasons for opposing the project, and I've written it out as if I was the council. Council cannot support the project, and you should formally advise the panel that the council is not satisfied that the proposed condition 11 of the draft notice of approval can be achieved in its purpose. To ensure the quality rural setting for the development, which complements the surrounding environment, due to the low lying level nature of the land affecting parts of the site where the landscape is proposed as mitigation impacts on the surrounding landholders and public roads. Simply put, a landscape screen is the principal measure for reducing the identified high impacts of the development on the immediate area. Where that visual screen is proposed to go is low-lying and swampy along the boundaries, which means the proposed tree lines cannot be effective, and they certainly won't be sustainable. Trees will not vigorously grow on the required height or in a reasonable time frame in these areas, which comprises the whole southeast corner and the western edge, which is the area of highest impact for this project. The land is incapable of supporting an effective vegetation screen. So that's one ground for not supporting it. The assessment process for this DA has been less than adequate since day one. We first became aware of this development when we received a letter from Council's Manager Development Assessment on the 21st of January this year. That letter talked generally about the project, and then in the last paragraph said the council officer responsible for this application is, and forgive me if I get the pronunciation wrong, Dwala Ananda. If you have any questions with respect to the application, please call Dwala, and gave the phone number that we could contact her on. The application was on public exhibition from the 24th of January till Monday, the 24th of February. I actually did have some questions, so I tried to contact Dwala, but unfortunately, and I understand everybody's entitled to leave, unfortunately, she was on leave overseas and couldn't be contacted for the large majority of the exhibition period.
Mr. Paul, can I just hold you up there? Can I have extension for Mr. Paul to continue to speak? Councillor Duffy, seconder, Councillor Ruddy. Keep going, sir.
Oh, have I gone for 3 minutes already?
You've gone 5, but you've got an extension for another 3 minutes, sir.
I received a second letter from the Manager Planning Assessment on the 10th of September 2025. I wouldn't call these letters consultation. I'd call them communication. That informed me that the Regional Planning Panel would be considering the matter on the 30th of September, and they would be in contact with me separately. The last paragraph in that letter said, for further information, please call the Assessing Officer, Benjamin Hicks. A little bit strange. Wasn't the Assessing Officer in the first letter, but was in the second letter. After your council meeting last week, I had reason to call the Assessing Officer. When I called Ben, he informed me he wasn't the Assessing Officer, but he did try to help. I want to point that out. I noticed in your council papers last week, and it's the same again today, by the way, that the Statement of Environmental Effects, which was attachment 1, had the word redacted at the top of each page. How can such an important document that's used to inform the assessors, the community and the Regional Planning Panel be redacted? It must mean that there's a replacement document, an updated version, and if there is, why was that document not made available to the community and the councillors? And I suspect the Regional Planning Panel. And I thought, you know what, if I'm correct and there is a latter document, we should be entitled to a copy of that document. So I contacted the Western Regional Planning Panel to inquire as to why the latest version of the Statement of Environmental Effects was not on their website. They informed me I would have to talk to council, as they are the ones that upload the documents to the website. That was my inquiry of Ben. What I learned from Ben was that not all documents in these matters are made available to the public. Interesting, given the importance of some of the documents, for the community to understand the impacts of how they are proposed to be and how they're proposed to be addressed. I appreciate that Ben made inquiries of council's governance team, and they informed me that I would have to submit a GIPA to get access to some of this information.
Mr. McPaul, you've got 30 seconds to sum up if you don't mind, please, sir.
Thank you. So I did submit a GIPA, and I requested a heap of information, so I'll summarise what the rest of this is about. And some of that information was able to be made available by council staff. Some of it was subject to the Copyright Act 1968. And I was told that I would have to contact the authors of those documents to gain access. One of those documents was the updated Statement of Environmental Effects. So I contacted the proponents, who were the authors of those documents, and I actually got a copy of that document on Thursday last week. It contained, by doing a page turn, no less than 6 changes. Now, if you're smart enough to do a search on your computer, you'll find that there's 10 changes. Those changes included landscaping, fire risk, stream water channel assessment, watercourse response, and mitigation measures for the landscape. As far as I'm aware, nobody else has had access to that document. It's still not available on the planning panel's website.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to have to cut you off there. I've been very
Thank you.
lenient. But,
I have more in these documents. I'm happy to leave copies of the documents. There's a lot more, what I believe, important information, but I'll be pointing that out to the regional panel tomorrow as well.
thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, you just
Oh,
stated,
sorry.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. McFall. Thank you for your presentation. Look, I gather from where you've been as an employee of various organisations. One, I know you from being the CEO of Cadia Valley, or which way you were
General Manager.
General Manager. That'll do. Yes, okay. But I also know that you've been seconded by Regis as well. So therefore, you're not a don't take this as being, you're not offensive to this at all, because I mean it in a good way, that you're not dumb, you're fairly intelligent type person. But you've gone through some intelligent stuff here as regards to the planning matters. Have you had assistance with someone to do this type of thing with planning matters? I mean, you're talking about the GEPA Act for the missing documents and the actual terminology where you read out what you said as to what the reason why we have that. Have you had contact with someone?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, so I was General Manager of Cadia Valley Operations for a very long time, 15 years. In fact, I worked for Regis as a consultant. I've worked with a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge about the planning system in general, but for this particular matter, I have truth tested and ground tested everything that I just said with a very experienced town planner that's also had experience with major projects and has a master's in law. So, yeah, I've used an expert to help me with this.
Yes, Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mr. McFall. So in relation to the planner that you've engaged to have a look at all this stuff, what are the planning matters that mean that this doesn't comply?
What other?
What are the planning matters? So you've mentioned the screening. Was there something else in those documents that you were able to uncover?
It's actually in the back of my document, and I would have got to that, but yeah, sorry. So for a start, I think Chris Delaney, one of the speakers, is going to talk about the streams on the site. So if you look at the first order stream that flows through the site, it's been marked on this Hydroline spatial data set under Department of Planning and Water, and it's an enhanced stream that actually separates and flows in 2 directions. And by enhanced, I mean it's a first order stream, and under the Water Act, if someone enhances the drain or cuts a drain, then they, under that act, they call it an enhanced stream. And the proponents called a channels report, it doesn't fully address the importance of that stream as to feeding the Orange City Council's drinking water supply. Certainly, I mentioned the visual screens can't be affected. The contamination report is lacking. And I've got notes on that, and I could leave that for you. And then the most important note is that council was actually under pressure to finalise their assessment report. And through my GIPA, I came across an email dated the 27th of August 2025 from the assessing officer, and it reads, "Hi Alan, Council is under pressure from the Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure to provide the planning assessment report. The date for determination will be finalised shortly, and the process leading up to determination will soon commence, including the public meeting. I am required to finalise my report by the end of this week. In the absence of additional information requested, the application may need to be recommended for an unfavourable outcome. Could you please advise on the timeframe for providing the requested information? Now, if you carefully read the documents provided to the Western Regional Planning Panel, you will see that there were 3 reports that were submitted after that request on the 28th, which meant the assessing officer had limited time to digest and include them into her final assessment report, which has been provided to the approving authority. The fact that the general public and council wasn't given access to that revision A of the Statement of Environmental Effects, I believe means the assessment process is flawed, and I believe the Western Regional Planning Panel should give that some fairly heavy weighting. So there's more than one reason for council to oppose it. Sorry, any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr. McCall.
There's been a lot of reading and a lot of research, let me tell you, over the last week in a very short period of time. And I do sympathise with the town planners, because there's a fair bit in this, and if they were put under pressure towards the end, that's just unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Linda Cruikshank.
My
Yeah, 5
name is
minutes,
Linda
Linda.
Cruikshank, and I live next door to the proposed solar farm on Cadia Road. I would request that council do not approve this development for the following reasons. The neighbours are united in their opposition to it. There have been 41 submissions against it. This blot on the landscape will be seen as far away as Forest Road. It will turn the pretty rural setting of Springside into an industrial site with no benefit to the local community, only to the developers. I thought Orange Tourism was promoting a food and wine area with its attractive vineyards, orchards and autumn colours. This 25-acre solar farm is out of place in this lovely area, which is also close to a nearby renowned Pinnacle Road vineyard. This 25-acre solar farm to be hidden by trees will take years, and the appropriate local species need to be planted for this to be a success. This is a difficult area in which to establish native trees, being cold, frosty and wet in winter. If the solar farm is to be developed, the tree screens need to be established well before construction commences. Otherwise, this unsightly development will be a visual eyesore for years to come. It must be remembered that this is a water catchment area for Orange water supply. Building this 25-acre solar farm with its disturbance of soil and environment there will be a concern for runoff into it. This solar farm is set to be in place for 35 years. This rush to renewables has been without adequate consultation with the nearby residents, who will be affected adversely both visually and financially, with loss of value to our properties. The only people gaining from this development are the developers, not anyone else. My aim on my land is to leave it in better condition than when I found it. This land will not be left in better condition after solar farm development ceases. Thank you.
Thank you. And excuse me, our next speaker is Joanna Singster. Joanna. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to highlight some cumulative effects of the proposed solar farms within the jurisdiction of Orange City Council. Naturally, I'm on the Lone Pine side of solar farms, but I strongly agree with everything that's going on Cadia Road. So firstly, I'd like to address the drinking water contamination. Damaged panels have the potential to release toxic heavy metals into the soil and ultimately into the waterways, which may jeopardise aquatic life, ecosystems and human health. And so what is the management plan to prevent ground and surface water contamination of existing waterways? Secondly, the construction method of the solar farm, the proposed PEG system comprises of individual panels interconnected in expansive blocks, measuring, I know from my research, measuring up to 900 metres squared. They stand at a height of 1 metre with their surface essentially parallel to the ground. The complications arising from this layout include the dense shade produced by these large blocks of panels inhibits all growth and microbial activity, resulting in soil erosion and the subsequent washing away of silt and contaminants into the drinking water supply and the environmentally sensitive site during rain events. Grazing of sheep is incompatible with these panels. The panels are more susceptible to damage from hailstones as well as rocks in the case of Lone Pine Avenue. Biannual maintenance visits, unless supplemented by drones, are unlikely to identify broken panels within the blocks. There exists a heightened risk to bird life colliding with these panels, reminiscent of the lake effect. And lastly, the waste and the landfill. The initial phase of construction will generate substantial amounts of packaging waste and the disposal of the inevitable broken solar panels en route. The 3 contracts issued by EDPR in our precinct will result in a staggering total of 60,000 end-of-life panels. It is indeed alarming. Australia is making commendable strides in the rollout of renewable energy. However, I believe this council must contemplate what our city represents and what we wish to promote. In my view, our aspirations revolve around tourism, agriculture, viticulture, picturesque gardens, and the preservation of nature. If we open the floodgates to renewable energy projects, where will it end? Such a course of action could irrevocably tarnish our cherished image. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christopher Delaney. Is Christopher with us yet? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Chris Delaney. My wife and I are the owners of Rose Cottage. The edge of the proposed development is approximately 200 metres from our kitchen window. The proposed project site sits within the Orange drinking water catchment and contains a mapped watercourse, identified in Figure 11 of the Statement of Environmental Effects as a first order stream. This classification is based on the Hydroline Spatial Dataset, which was compiled using topographical maps at a desktop level. For accuracy, however, this must be ground truth on site. In reality, the project area contains a first order braided stream. That is, the stream separates and then reconverges. After crossing the property boundary between 168 and 140 Cadia Road, one arm flows east along the boundary fence, while the other flows north before turning east. This means the project could have a far greater impact on the first order stream than is acknowledged in either the EIS or the Channel Assessment Report. I also want to address the issue of landscaping. In the revised Statement of Environmental Effects, dated 26 of May 25, revision, and the draft Notice of Determination, General Condition 11, it is noted that the first 210 metres from the eastern end of the southern boundary will require vegetation planting to a minimum width of 1 metre and 5 metres of height in maturity. The screen, only 1 metre wide, even if it grows successfully, will do almost nothing to reduce the visual impact for one of the most affected receivers, as identified in the Visual Impact Assessment. From our kitchen and living windows, we have a direct line of sight into the southeastern corner of the project site. This area is swampy and rarely dries, even during summer, which raises further questions about whether proposed vegetation will even establish successfully, given The importance of an effective vegetation screen to reduce impacts from multiple vantage points, the fact that the greatest visual impact will occur immediately at project inception when the change to local character is most dramatic, and the long time it will take for any vegetation screen to provide meaningful mitigation. Condition 30, landscaping establishment and maintenance, must be strengthened. It should require that all landscaping be installed and proven effective before any other site works are allowed to commence. I want to be clear, I strongly believe approving this project would be the wrong decision, but if the Western Regional Planning Panel were to approve it, then at a minimum, robust and enforceable landscaping conditions must be in place to mitigate its unacceptable impacts. These points could be and should be included in Council submission to the Planning Panel. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Duffy.
Mr. Delaney, thank you very much. My question, I've been out there and I know the property quite well, was owned by a former orchardist, Joe Leone. Now, I know probably to the west of where you are, it's fairly boggy.
Yep.
Is there still water above ground there at the
Yes.
moment? It's still boggy?
Yep.
And it's a certain, what size would it be? 100 square metres or 50 square metres of bog area?
Of boggy land and
Yep,
stuff in
boggy
there.
land would be at least that from what I can gather.
Oh yes, yep. So down in our front paddock,
Okay.
it's quite boggy. We can't get any, even driving a four-wheel motorbike in there.
Now, the next question to you is, as you look out your kitchen window and you're looking to the northwest, you can see the ambience of the area. I'm talking about the Hereford cattle or and Black Angus or an orchard in the background, which is Valley Keen, I think the name of it. And those sort of things. That's a rural setting that you will actually lose.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our last speaker is
Excuse
Mr.
me,
Oh, sorry.
excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, I didn't see it.
Sorry, I've just got a question through you, if that's okay, to the speaker. Just in relation to talking about the solar panels being close to the catchment area, has there been cases of where solar panels have leaked? Like, is that a common thing? You know, how often does that happen? And
That wasn't so much a question for me. That was probably more a question.
Who was your question directed at, councillor?
well, probably to any of the speakers really that have spoken about that, like, because they did talk about the runoff on them. So any of the studies that they've done, or it might be a question we can take on notice and come back to us, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think we'll take that on notice if that's okay. The other speakers are finished.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Mr. Mark Linfield. Is Mark with us?
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, I'm at the back of the site and I have solar. I've got 120 panels. I'm not against renewable energy at all. The word lifestyle blocks, that's what there are out there. They're small blocks. They're not necessarily large agricultural productions. People have gone there because they want a lifestyle, not look over the panels. The other thing that's very interesting is everyone's talked about the effect of the panels. What about the effect of the 3-metre fence? The planting is within the 3-metre fence. So we still look at a 3-metre high barbed wire fence instead of a rule fence. And so I'm not entirely sure that fence shouldn't be within the property and that planting shouldn't be on the other side of that. Why should we look at a 3-metre high barbed wire fence? It's just as offensive as the panels. So the garden at my property was almost destroyed. It was one of the most important gardens in the Central West, and I spent well over $1 million in repairing that garden. The other thing is that we've just had our results back from the LLS. We no longer have DDT. My cattle, which have grazed there for 12 months, had no detectable DDT. There's a lot of effort that went into that, and there's no reason why the development that's planned should not be on non-affected or non-contaminated land. Tony and I both have contaminated properties. There's no doubt that this property is contaminated. If they want to build it, well, then let them first decontaminate it. The other thing that was raised in our original objections to this is that both myself and my neighbour on the left, who both have long boundaries, are planting trees. The effect of those trees within 8 to 10 years will be to shade more than 30% of this solar farm. So for 25 years, there'll be a 30% loss of effectiveness. If you don't think that's going to lead to legal action against us, not being able to do what we wish to do when they've been put on notice, then it's foolish. My trees will be 40 to 50 metres high. If you look at the back of the solar farm as it's planned, it's been modified because of one radiata tree. That radiata tree is shorter than all the trees that I planted before this was lodged along my boundary. The developer's been told in our submissions to council that both of us, me and also the other side of Tony, are going to plant tall trees. So they're unaware of that. Why does this need to be here? Are you telling me that there's no other larger property on a high tensile line in this area that couldn't accommodate this without the effect on people that it's having? We're not living in China where you build a city, a railway load, and you just simply move people out. Why should any of us be affected by that? It's a very large development in an area where there are very, very small properties. It's not appropriate. Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot more to say. I put a lot of effort into removing DDT from my property, restoring a garden that was one of the most important gardens in the Central West. I don't see why I should, for the rest of my life, look upon a 3-metre high barbed wire fence, let alone the solar panels. The way in which it's been approached is incorrect. There should be no effect on any of us. It's not about the greater good. This could go somewhere else. It's about having no impact on the people who live there and then allowing it to go forward. I'm not anti-renewable, but I'm anti the fact that a few people might pay a high price for what? Because it could easily be located 7 or 8 kilometres away on a 200 or 300 hectare property where it's not seen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The council meeting will now resume. Notice of motion, notice of rescission, 2.1, development application DA 771/2024 in brackets 1, proposed electricity generating works, solar farm and battery energy storage, BES at lot 5 DP 6173-140 Cadia Road, Springside. Councillors, there's a recommendation on page 3. Councillor Duffy, would you like to move your notice of rescission?
Move the rescission motion.
Have a seconder. Councillor Gretner.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duffy, would you like to speak and discuss the new information that you'd like to provide that has brought us to this notice of rescission today?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to, and thank you for bringing the extraordinary meeting to us at this to the table. First of all, I want to do with what most people have said, that I'm not against any type of energy, whether it be wind, solar, coal, nuclear or gas or hydroelectric. I think it's all that can be available, reliable and affordable. Having that out of the way, I do take notice of exactly what Mr. McCall said as regards to his advice from previous planners, is that council cannot support the project, and we should formally advise the panel the council is not satisfied with the proposed condition of draft 11 for approval to achieve that purpose, to ensure quality of rural setting for the development which complements the surrounding environment due to the low-lying nature of the land, affecting parts of the site where landscaping is proposed to mitigate impacts on the surrounding lands and public roads. Now, I'm just going to diverse a little bit as regards to the planning thing, as regards to those councillors, and I know Councillor Whitten is one of them, that I want to just point out that I asked Mr. McCall the exact question about that, had he had professional advice and what he wanted, and he said yes, he had done that. Now, I wonder if advised councillors that we had a previous case in this chamber here, and it was called about Gorbally House, which I call the Hill Street Blues, and council staff recommended approval for that DA to go through, and a group of council, their council, after consultation with the objectors, brought to council a reasons why it should be refused, and council voted to refusal against the proposal of the staff. Now, that is not uncommon, because you can go at different areas where you have different points of view from different planners. Now, that then was taken to the court by the proponent, and the component had to lodge 6 or 7, I'm not quite sure of the number, DAs to modify the DAs to get that through as a proposal. Now, I always look at the issue of intent of what's going on as well as far with regards to that. And the New South Wales government in 2022 is proposing to seek to amend the state planning rules to protect major rural centres from encroaching solar and wind developments as the state ramps up its shift to renewable powered grid. The proposed state emergency planning policy changes would limit the construction of large-scale wind or solar projects within 10 kilometres of this commercial centre of Albury, Armidale, Bathurst, Dubbo, Griffith, Orange, Tamworth and Wagga Wagga, and within 5 kilometres of residential land in those towns. Now, that's the intent of what a proposed change is, and that documentation has to be taken as considered. The intent of what's coming has to be taken into some account. I also want to talk about the which a couple of the speakers spoke about, the vegetation buffer zone. Now, I asked specifically about the low-lying water. Now, if you plant a tree in most low-lying water areas, it struggles. A lot of them will finish up dying. They'll get waterlogged and all those type of things there. But it's also the visual impact as well, which is taken away. And that's the reason why I asked Mr. Delaney about, if he looks out his window, the ambience of the area will totally change. He'll be looking at some trees if they're successful in growing, and the issue will be with those if they're successful in growing, and they will block his view of the rural setting that's there. As I said, the cattle, the sheep, if there's any about in that area, and the orchards that go here. The rural ambience has changed. So that is the reason why the very first comment with Mr. McPaul said there. I want to refer councillors to the issue of which this current planning committee, Central West Planning Committee, which refused a DA over at Mudgee, and the proposed development was contrary to the relevant aims of the LEP, and it's unlikely to conserve the significant visual elements that contribute to council's rural setting and character of the area. The proposed development is considered contrary to the objectives of those areas over there, which would, in our case, it's C3, I think the land is zoned at, and is in a water catchment area and does not preserve the rural character subject land, nor does it allow intensive plant agricultural activity. Now, during the statement of environmental effects, they refer to the large-scale solar farm guidelines on a regular basis. Now, if they're going to refer to those, and it's recommended that the proponents refer to those, and why wouldn't they look at a voluntary planning agreement? Because that's one of the questions we're always asking, is what's in it for us? And we could have got a better community and stakeholder engagement in the process. But when you consider the development, there is no real benefit to us as residents and ratepayers. There's rating structure stays the same. There's no ongoing employment for Orange or our region.
Councillor Duffy, can I just hold you up? Can I have somebody move an extension? Can Councillor Duffy continue? Yes. Councillor Judge, continue, Councillor. You said 5 minutes, that's all. So.
No reduction in the energy prices at all in any shape or form. But in saying that, I want to just go back to the issue of contamination, that Orange City Council's own mapping identifies the contamination in the area. But those of us who have been around a little bit longer can remember the early 1980s of the hailstones that fell in our area. And some of them were the size of tennis balls, some of them we've had some since then, which have been golf balls. Now, they're going to land on these solar panels, and in a heavy storm, there's going to be water everywhere, and it's going to go onto a already soggy ground, and it's going to go either into the underground or it's going to go and surface into our towns as well. So into our water catchment. That is a major concern for what I'm looking at. I'm also looking at the issue which Mr. McPaul went to with regards to procedural fairness. I think having the availability of the forms or the documents available to everyone to have a look at, and we as councillors were deprived of that the last document that he spoke about. It's just not procedural fairness, and I'll just leave it at that for the time being.
Thanks, councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor. Sorry, Kinghorn. Councillor Kinghorn.
I would just like to speak to the director or acting director to just address some of those additional concerns that have been related. Yeah, is it okay from the speakers today before? I think I saw you writing there. I know you've got.
I'm taking notes on that there, but I need probably specific details of what I'd like to talk about.
Okay. Right. So, was my concern with this is that, again, as I said last time, if it meets the criteria, then we can't do anything about it. You know, it doesn't mean that we care any less about what the people who live there want. You can't. But if things have been raised to suggest that perhaps it doesn't meet the criteria, then I would like to find out about that. So the first one was in relation to the screening.
Landscape. Sorry, the stream.
Yeah, the screening. Yeah.
So in relation to the stream, the development is classified as integrated development under the Environment Planning Assessment Act. Integrated development meaning that it needed, an authorisation from New South Wales Office of Water. They're the authority that deals with any works within 40 metres of the creek system. That organisation have issued them what's called general terms of approval, indicating that they'd be prepared to issue a licence for the development to proceed, subject to certain conditions of consent, and those recommendations are included in the draft notice of determination. So that was that, I guess, in relation to, that particular issue.
So sorry, the fact that it diverged, that doesn't make any difference. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, it's because it diverges and because it's got the creek system running through the actual property, it acknowledges that it needed general terms of it needed, an integrated approval from the New South Wales Office of Water.
So that was taken into account.
And so they're taken into consideration. There was a 28-day exhibition associated with that. They issued what's called general terms of approval. It's a concurrent role. Essentially, without those general terms of approval, the panel doesn't have the authority to actually deal with the application.
Okay.
So they provided a series of recommendations, rightly or wrongly. They've provided recommendations in relation to addressing, the stream issues that are raised associated with the proposed development. A couple of the other issues that the residents have raised, and they've all raised quite legitimate issues. The landscaping one is a key one. Just going to my notes here, I think it's clause 2.42 of the infrastructure set. It includes that the consent authorities will take into consideration some extra matters, and the provisions were changed, resulted from the change of the panel consideration of the development application out to the west of the city. You may note that proposal was located within an urban release area as such. They've now got controls there that ask council to ask the assessment or the consent authority to determine what impact that has. And two particular issues there is the landscape impact of a development on the regional centre, as well as, the impact that the development may have on the expanding regional city of Orange. So that's been addressed in the planning report. In regards to landscaping, there was 5 properties in particular that were identified as having a high visual impact as a result of the actual panels. There was a further 8 that had a moderate impact. And obviously the impact lessens as you get further and further away from the development site. Of those 5, when you have a high impact, you've got to determine is there an acceptable way of actually mitigating such. It's been alluded to today that some of the landscaping, the landscaping patch that has been proposed is inadequate. Landscaping proposed in areas that are waterlogged and inundated, and we question, whether that landscaping can practically be established over time. The only way to mitigate against, a visual impact that's been identified is through landscape screening. The panels are around about 1 metre high off the ground. Yes, there was the security fence that was surrounding the development itself. With that, there was, and I need to clarify one of the issues that one of the staff members, one of the constituents there spoke about is the width of landscaping. I need to clarify that condition, and I'll raise that with the planning panel tomorrow. But landscaping that was 5 metres wide in general was required. It was required of a series of sort of understoried landscaping as well as trees. And then after that 5 metres was an APZ of 10 metres for the bushfire protection before the actual solar farm was established there. A question for the planning panel, and it will be raised tomorrow by the residents as well as by staff, would be to ask the panel to carefully consider, I guess, the landscaping design as to whether or not they feel the landscaping outcome that's been contemplated will in actual fact achieve a reasonable outcome in terms of screening of these or mitigating the visual impacts of this development on surrounding areas. It's all acknowledged that the landscaping that is landscaping that's planted today will take some time to establish, and sometimes they look at the timing of how landscaping is established before solar panels are erected. They're all issues for the planning panel to consider. We've actually required that landscaping to be established in the first instance, acknowledging that it's leased in. There's a program there of maintaining that landscaping with regular watering and everything for the first 2 years, and then there's conditions on there that require the landscaping to be managed in perpetuity to council satisfaction. So again, it's determining the adequacy of those conditions to mitigate the impacts, the very real impacts that that the adjoining neighbours have actually raised in their submissions. So that probably attempts to address the issue of landscape buffering, because it's a critical issue. It's looked at from those residents. It's also looked at from the public domain. The elevation as you run along Cadia Road, there are vantage points where you'll see this for a little bit as you're travelling to I think it's the north. There's a couple of little points there. Otherwise, I guess it rolls over the slope and it's not readily visible from Cadia Road, other than a couple of vantage points. That was sort of water, that's sort of landscaping elements.
I think the contamination was addressed previously with that block. If the surrounding blocks are contaminated, then I agree it's probably likely that that one is. It's already contaminated though, and presumably any rain, things would be leaching through anyway. I mean, is it the likelihood of digging things up to put these things in? Is that going to make that worse?
That was taken into consideration by our environmental guys. The very nature of this project is a little bit different to the traditional method of construction, whereby they dig boreholes and they've got like a panel system that runs on a tangent sort of thing. These proposals are peg-driven. They're very small pegs that are essentially driven into the ground. So there was a less propensity for disturbance of any soils associated with that particular proposal. Preliminary contamination assessments were considered in in determining the suitability of it. Council is required to consider whether the land's contaminated. The panel is required to consider whether the land is contaminated, whether the land is contaminated and it is the suitable in its contaminated form for the new use. Then they look at the nature of the use, the nature of construction, and the longer term impact that might have on the surrounding local environment or local area. So yes, contamination is still a considerable issue for the panel to consider. We believe that it's the approach we've taken is reasonable in the context. And again, that'll be raised with the planning panel tomorrow.
So with what you've heard today, what concerns you about it?
Oh, look, my professional staff have gone through, I guess, the planning assessment report. There's been a few things raised around in the assessment here. Everyone was given the opportunity to put a submission together. There was 42 submissions, 41 of which were against that development. I see the key issues as everything that the residents have raised. I feel that they've been addressed, whether they've been addressed to the satisfaction of everybody. That's the process that moves forward with that in the planning panel. I intend to, depending on which, whatever the council decides to raise or determine today, is that they'll be making those. I'll take some notes. I'll make those relevant or make those known to the panel, indicating that there was that we had the meetings today and that these issues were raised. I'm particularly interested in, seeing the panel's views on whether or not the land and its, the lower lying inundation, whether they give special consideration to the type of vegetation. I'll be asking them to consider that, because ultimately they need to consider the suitability of that condition to mitigate, the impacts that have been raised or that have been noted. Other than that, looking at professional recommendation is that the proposal still is worth approving. and that's why we've done our recommendation.
Okay, and the information that we got in relation to the out-of-date environmental report and the new one not being available and the person not being contactable during the consultation period, that's a bit of a concern.
I have staff away from time to time. In that particular case, I had a staff who wasn't on leave, was working remotely, who was at the time in a slightly different time zone. I understood that there was this community. I mean, at the end of the day, that particular panel member was on leave for part of that particular period. I was essentially in the office the whole time. My coordinator was in the office for the whole time as well. There's access to staff in relation to any development application at any time. I don't know what else I can probably say about that, but there's a public exhibition period whereby they'd have the opportunity to put a submission in where we have to address those issues.
The updated version of the environmental report, which one did we use? Paul suggested there were several differences, and I obviously haven't seen the new one. So
I'll need to make sure that the correct version is available on the planning panel website as of this afternoon. Essentially, an applicant has a responsibility to upload any relevant documents onto the planning panel, onto the planning portal, and the planning portal is then available for everyone to have a look at those particular documents. And the version controller, I think there were some issues raised there about redaction of documents. Janessa might like to go to the redaction of documents. We're required to take out phone numbers and personal details associated with the applicant, et cetera, et cetera. That's essentially all we take out of a document when we're actually uploading it to the council. As to whether there was various other changes, I think Mr. McBurney raised there. I'll need to double check and clarify that. All of those documents whatever's on the portal was actually taken into consideration in the assessment of the development application. When the development application goes on exhibition, all documents are available to the community to respond to. After the exhibition period, there are then certain restrictions under the GIPA legislation as to how you go about getting access to those documents. So that's essentially that's the reason why Mr. McBurney was asked to go through that GIPA process in terms of gaining access to documents. Development application is accompanied by the development application, statement of environmental effects, plans, accompanying a whole host of accompanying environmental reports, et cetera, all of which were available for 28 days during the exhibition period.
Okay, but the new environmental assessment documents came out after that.
Oh, look, throughout the planning assessment of the application, my planning staff will actually ask for additional information. They'll request, they'll probe, they'll ask for changes to be made, essentially, or requested information that will inform that assessment. Those documents are not necessarily available to the public, or not necessarily the subject of any further exhibition process, but they're nonetheless available if you were going to actually request a copy of those through the GIPA legislation.
Sorry, I'm not asking that. I'm asking whether the way you assess it changes if a new document comes out.
Essentially, if there's additional information that's been submitted by the applicant, we're obliged to take that into consideration in making a recommendation.
So it's up to the applicant to put up a new standard.
That's right. No, the applicant may upload any documents they wish to the portal during that assessment process, to which our staff are then required to work through the myriad of documents in making their recommendation. So if, for example, our planning staff required an amendment to the statement of environmental effects to clarify a particular issue, that document was uploaded, that document then formed public record.
Okay, but if the applicant didn't put up a new updated document, you wouldn't look at it?
We wouldn't look at it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can stay there. I just have a couple of questions. And last time this came before council, I spoke about the voluntary planning agreements and the BES, which are the batteries, and also council's rating of the facility and how council rates such as facilities. And should Orange City Council be examining a new rating subcategory under business and renewable projects, etc. I guess my major concern all along with this, and Councillor Duffy has touched on, and so has Councillor Kinghorn, is, and it goes back to, I feel that we're in conflict with the New South Wales government itself, because their media announcement, which they did updated guidelines to state planning rules to protect some of the state's major regional centres from encroaching on solar and wind development after receiving almost ununanimous support for the changes. And in that amendment, which was first flagged by government back in October, I think it was last year, must have been, seeks to restrict renewable energy projects from building within 10 k's of a commercial centre and within 5 kilometres of a residential building. And as Councillor Duffy said, that was in Albury, Armidale, Bathurst, Dubbo, Griffith, Orange, Tamworth and Wagga. And the rules do not seek to immediately rule out the projects that fell within the above-mentioned zones, but rather require authorities to consider additional mandatory matters around key issues. And there's been some key issues raised here with today, such as the visual impact and agricultural land before granting approval. I guess my first question is, you spoke, or one of the speakers spoke about, authorities visiting the sites, or did we have any actual authorities visit those sites to have a look, or were they just provided documents showing a map of what was proposed?
So, as part of the assessment of the development application, Council wrote to the New South Wales Office of Water, we wrote to the Department of Primary Industries. I think to name a couple, I forget, I'll have to check the record for other government authorities that may or may not have been involved in that process. It's totally up to, I guess, those authorities as to whether or not they visit a site or not visit a site. More often than not, they're likely to do some sort of desktop analysis, I would think, rather than as a formal inspection. The actual Joint Regional Planning Panel, they carried out an inspection of the property. We met on site. We walked across the entire site. The panel asked questions. The panel asked questions about landscaping elements, and also encouraged the applicant to enhance the landscaping at that particular on-site panel meeting as such. They're the only sort of so-called, authorities. I wouldn't call them authorities. They're just the determining body that have actually been to the site and inspected the site. So we understood it from the perspective of where the likely impacts, or those properties that were likely impacted by the development. So they were fully averse of that. They asked questions. Other than that, I can't vouch for whether or not a government agency visits the site or not as part of its assessment back to, or advice back to council.
Yeah, I think in the government's media release, it says that new rules will ensure renewable energy projects are built in the right places to allow room for regional cities to grow and develop, including safeguarding vital land needed to make regional cities more livable. When we look at Orange, I'm assuming the southern side of Orange is the coldest side of Orange, which makes me wonder why they'd go there in the first place. Then we talk about Shirley and how Shirley is expanding to the south and at a quick rate. And we've got a medical precinct, which is on the southern side of Orange as well. So that appears to be in conflict with this development also. So in practice, the changes to the State Environmental Plan Policy Infrastructure 2007 will require consent authorities to consider if a proposal development will conflict with existing or approved uses of land, such as land zone for residential use. And as I said, I think they talk about 10 k's for commercial and 5 k's for residential. What is the distance from Shirley to this land out there?
Shirley to Cadia Road, I would say it's within probably 3 or 4 kilometres.
So certainly within 5.
Yeah, I'm happy to perhaps eliminate. I'll add a little bit to that if you wish me to.
Yeah, because again, that appears to be in conflict with what the government is proposing. And as a younger gentleman, I actually worked out on Cadia Road and an orchard very close to that. And I remember back in the early 80s, they had a few hailstorms which decimated a lot of those orchards in the early 80s, and they come in quick succession. 2 or 3 years wiped a lot of them out. My other concern is with regards to climate change and whether we potentially going to see more of these type of storms. And when we talk about being on a creek or on a waterway, I guess that's why I'm a bit concerned when we see people doing desktop analysis or investigations and not actually attending those sites. So I find that quite concerning, to be quite honest. And I know that's not an issue for yourself, but people in authority who are having a huge say in what our city's going to look like in the future, don't take the time to get out of the office and go and have a look at what's going on and what's important to our community, and they're relying on a desktop audit, I find that quite concerning, to be quite honest, but that's another conversation for another day. Mr. McPaul, I think it was, spoke about the redaction of certain information, and that could be, I guess that can be looked at in a few different ways. There might be a reason why there could have been names or something like that redacted. But one of the things which did concern me was an email which you referred to where he spoke about there was a perception or that people may have been pressured to make a decision.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I've got to go. I'll join online.
Thank you.
In the next few minutes.
So that was a concern to me, that whether the people were being pressured to make a decision during a period of time which they may not normally be expected to make. It's just a comment. It's certainly not a question directed at you because you had no say in that. And with regards to, I spoke about before about an emphasis on the impacts on the waterway, and with potential hailstorms are going to come again. It's just a matter of when that's going to occur and what precautions are we taking. Are they enough to stop an impact on our water supply? And we certainly there are some concerns there. And as I said, there were some concerns. I have huge concerns around the speed of our town progressing or moving forward south. Also, I just want to comment on the consent authorities. Obviously we'll consider. I have to consider whether the project will significantly impact on the conflict needed for the growth of the city in the future, and or specifically impact on the scenic quality of landscape of the regional city. I think there are some concerns that it doesn't matter what type of barrier they put around, what sort of trees, it's certainly going to impact on the visual aspect of that. And again, that's in conflict of what the government are suggesting in their media release. So, I just wanted to make those comments, and I guess like some other councillors, I'm really concerned that as a councillor who have major concerns with not only this one but another one, which is on Lone Pine Avenue, I'm a bit frustrated that we have these concerns, but our hands are being tied by government laws, I guess you could say. Orange City Council aren't the concerned authority. It's obviously Western Region Planning Panel. I'm not comfortable with this at all, but I'm not quite sure where that Orange City Council, apart from taking the actions which we already have, whether we can, express our concerns any stronger than in a letter to the Western Region Planning Panel and through yourself, Mr. Johnson, and include, obviously, the concerns that Mr. McPaul has got documented there, which he didn't have enough time to canvass, probably as much as he would have liked to have. They need to be included in the correspondence going to the Western Region Planning Panel tomorrow. And hence the reason why we had this extraordinary meeting at lunchtime, to allow our staff enough time to fully formulate in an appropriate way our concerns, which are real, not perceived. We have real concerns about this development going where it is, because we understand that the town is going vastly moving south. Whilst this decision might be made today, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, I have no doubt that that area out there is going to look a lot different than what it is at this point in time. Councillor Whitten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm speaking in support of the rescission motion, and should the rescission motion be successful, then I'm sure we'll be debating what it is we're going to put into the report. And I think one of the things that you highlighted, Mr. Mayor, was the fact that what's the benefit of this particular infrastructure to the community? And if I look at case study, I've been reading some case study whilst everyone's been talking around this particular DA, these types of DA applications, and certainly the staff have followed. They've made their decision based on the information in front of them and around the planning laws that exist today. But we as the council, whilst we're not the authority to approve or refuse this application, we can certainly put forward our opinion to the planning panel about what we believe to be the best thing for Orange, because at the end of the day, we represent the community. We're elected by the community. This is our city. We're not a res zone. And if you look at some of the case study, the major things the major reason why these smaller solar panel sites get refused, the 5 megawatt and 10 megawatt sites, there's a few reasons, and they've all been mentioned, specifically when they impact water catchment areas, right? That's one significant reason. The other is community and social factors, strong community opposition. At the end of the day, out of the 42 submissions put forward to this council, 40 were against. And it says here, lack of demonstrated community benefit or consultation is a major reason for refusal of this particular type of application. So my opinion is the reason I'm supporting the rescission is so that we can, if we choose to, if council, if this particular motion is successful, we can put a submission to the planning panel that gives them a sense of that we don't believe that this is fit for purpose for our city, specifically in the location that it's going. And I mentioned in the last council meeting the fact that it's going to lock up that land for 35 years, especially when Orange has a big emphasis on the housing shortage. There are other zones within New South Wales that are focusing on renewables and much, much bigger than what we're talking about here, like enormous. They're at Wellington and Dubbo, around those areas. They have enormous renewable zones, right, that dwarf this one. And this one, 5, 10 megawatts, megawatts, that's important. But it's not actually, it's not giving economics to our community directly. So I think there's a few reasons, and like everyone in the room, I'm totally supportive of renewables, but we have to be sensible about it. It has to be in the right location, not just because it's popular politics. We have to make a decision on the best interest of the entire community and the future of Orange. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll be supporting the rescission motion.
Councillor Greenhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I'm totally in support of the rescission motion. Totally echo the sentiments that everyone that's spoken today has said. I have huge concerns about our water security and contamination issues. I think that definitely needs more time. And as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, the growth of our city all growing south. It may be 2 or 3 kilometres now, but in the next 10 years, it could be sitting, a lot closer than that. And as Councillor Whitten said, we're not in a renewable energy zone. I see lots and lots of these big scale things up around Inverell and so forth as well. I'd like a bit more information on, if those panels did get damaged with hail and so forth, what that means for our water security. I'm not against renewable energy as well, but, we do have to make sure it is in the right area. And the other one we've got coming up, in Lone Pine Avenue, again, we're setting a precedent, and we really need to be careful with this decision. So I think we've done the right thing by giving it more time and more open discussion. I would have liked to have seen the most recent environmental assessment report. As Councillor Kinghorn has said, it concerns me that they haven't put it up. I start going, well, why haven't they put it up for us all to have a look at? But yeah, I'm totally in support of the rescission motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to thank all the speakers. I'd like to speak in support of the rescission motion. I'm not against renewable energy either, but this is certainly the wrong place for this development. I'm also interested the applicant/owner of the property of the proposal hasn't presented to either meeting in regards to this matter to present in either way or answer any questions from councillors or staff. This proposal site for the solar farm is only 4.8 kilometres from town residents, and I refer to the residents of Sharp Road in south of Orange. Shirley residents are much closer to this development than the 4.8 kilometres from Sharp Road. The nearest commercial residential place, and I refer to across the Orange Health, is actually 2.1 kilometres as the crow flies. There was no consultation with the neighbours other than a letter. The project is within the Orange water catchment, in which ECO acknowledged it was a concern. The proposal is not in a renewable energy zone. This matter, as previously mentioned, and I will say that again, it had 41 missions against and only the one for. There is nothing in this development for the Orange community or the neighbourhood of this proposal. The site likely holds contamination in the soil with neighbouring soil. It has been proven to be contaminated. The site to the west, 168 Cadia Road, has 3 contamination sites. There has also been recent tests to support this. We haven't seen the most up-to-date environmental report on this. Any damage to the solar panels, as previously mentioned, is always a massive risk of contaminating the Orange water supply. This here is a 35-year project and will be damaging to our town's growth, as mentioned, and to the south and to the neighbourhood of this proposal if it gets approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
I just have a question through you to the Director, if possible. And this has been touched on a few times. I have concerns that we just don't have all the information. So Mr. McFall mentioned a version of statement of environmental effects, which does not match what's in our papers. He said that there's 6 notable differences. I do note the version that's in the papers is the 26th of May, which seems to align with dates we were given. But given that we're here to make a decision today, and I believe that that was going to be taken on notice, how do we do that when we don't have all the information? I think that we need an answer to that now in order to move forward. Do we have all the information? Do we have the most recent statement of environmental effects?
Mr. Johnson, would you like to comment?
I believe that the statement of environmental effects that's included in the business paper is the most recent statement of environmental effects that we have on our records for consideration of the application. I don't normally attach a copy of the statement of environmental effects to the application, but I did so there's some background information. The development application comprises many documents. Essentially, there's a statement of environmental effects, there's the plans, there's perhaps a visual impact assessment, there's contamination assessments, there's traffic impact assessments, there's water quality impact assessments. There's a whole host of documents, and if I was to include those in the business paper, the business paper is about this deep. Those documents are always available if any councillor wishes to have a closer look at those documents in any development application that we do. What in this particular instance, essentially a copy of the planning report, a copy of the statement of environmental effects that gives some background information, a copy of the planning assessment report, the notice of determination of plans have been provided to the council. I said the role in this particular thing is to determine whether the council wishes to make that submission to the panel, and then for staff to advocate, I guess, the position of the council in those proceedings tomorrow.
So there is a chance that what council has and has been provided in our papers versus what Mr. McFall have are different.
Oh, look, I I'm not quite sure whether there's any difference with any of those documents. I'd have to take that on notice and go through with our staff to clarify that. I can make sure that that's clarified for the purposes of the panel tomorrow.
Okay.
I just don't have the answer as to what Mr. McBurney has raised today without sort of evaluating that file.
Okay.
Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, I have a question to the director. My question is, and Mr. McFall spoke about it, as regards to the document not being uploaded, so the general public can't even see it. I mean, I'm not happy that we didn't get it because we should have had it to read, and I'm fully aware that we get a business papers probably 3 days before the actual meeting, and I think the last meeting there was 465 pages for us to read, so it would have been silly by the end of the day reading that in one day. But I would tend to think when you got people in the general public and the people that are affected would want the relevant information to be able to be accessed, and I believe, if I'm correct, that they weren't able to access that information because it had copyright on it. And they were the ones that went away and sought professional help from other planners that are around. I'm not going to say like what council's thing is. There's two different issues here. One is that a council staff do a submission, and one is the council is going to make up, the council or are going to make up their decision whether they agree with that. And the way I'm looking at it, but I have a huge concern as what Councillor Ruddy has as regards to that document not being available for anyone else to have a look at that wants to make a comment on it. Is that the case, that document wasn't available to everyone?
Look, the development application is lodged on the New South Wales Planning Portal. Council will request additional information if required to clarify or to challenge, I guess, anything that we needed to do as part of that assessment report. The panel, the actual New South Wales Planning Portal is the avenue, is the way in which those documents are uploaded to that application. Council staff will place that on public exhibition. We place that on public exhibition, with those dates that Mr. Paul. Sorry, I was going to call it Mr. before. Those documents were the documents that were formally placed on public exhibition at the time. Whether or not staff require further clarification or a change to those documents during the assessment procedure is up to staff to evaluate through that process. If we think that there's a significant change to the documentation that's been submitted with an application, we can determine whether or not there's a process whereby further public exhibition of an application is required. It was exhibited for 28 days. My staff required clarification on certain elements. Those documents were uploaded. It was determined that further exhibition of the application was not warranted in this case.
Yeah, that's not my question. My question, I don't feel it's been answered. My question was, has the whole document been uploaded so the general public, like Mr. McFall, it wasn't uploaded?
No, I believe every document that we have before us.
The council had, yes, but I'm talking about the actual one that had copyright written on it.
Well, the copyright issue comes from, I guess, through the GIPRA legislation.
Yeah.
A copy of all the development application, every single document that forms part of that exhibition is available to the public during the exhibition period for the 28 days. After the exhibition period finishes, there's GIPRA legislation that cuts in, and at that particular point in time, they need to go through a GIPRA application through Janessa's team to actually get access to certain documents. So part of that process, and perhaps Janessa can actually comment on this issue further for you, is that there are copyright issues on certain documents, and we have responsibilities of issuing those documents under freedom of information after doing that assessment. So if there's a copyright issue on a particular plan, Janessa will raise that issue.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Also, just a question, just to try and bring this all together, irrespective of what people personally think about this and where it is, with the previous resolution and with what you've heard today, does this meet the planning criteria?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, what we're saying is we're making a submission acknowledging that it appears to meet the criteria while outlining the concerns. This is not saying we really want this. It's saying we are accepting that it probably meets the criteria, but we're worried about this, and this. That's what, based on what's on here, is what we'll be doing if the reciprocation is unsuccessful.
Yeah, so I believe that, look, it's obviously our staff recommendation, our staff responsibility to carry out an assessment of the application. said, because the Joint Regional Planning Panel is the consent authority, there was no role for council to play in this process. But out of courtesy and the fact that there was 42 submissions received in relation to the application, it was important that it's regionally significant development. It's a matter of the practice that Mark and I have adopted over the time is to make sure that a copy of that assessment report, a copy of the documentation is made available for council so that they can make an informed decision on whether or not they wish to support the development application or not support the development application. What I need out of this particular meeting is whether or not you support the recommendation moving forward, or if you don't support the recommendation moving forward, what are the reasons articulated out clearly as to what you would like to be advocated to the panel for their consideration. And I have then the responsibility as part of that panel hearing is addressing each one of those, or raising those issues with the panel, indicating that the council has strong views on X, Y, and Z.
But with the current resolution, it's not actually saying we support this. It's saying we get that it probably meets the criteria. We don't like this, or this.
I guess that's up to council as to.
Sorry, with the one, if it's not changed, that's what.
The one I understand
is it taken as a support?
I understand the one at the moment is acknowledging the resolution is acknowledging that planning assessment was done, however, requesting that the panel give careful consideration to a wide range of issues associated with the development. And certainly is obvious that if that particular resolution was lost, is that it would be that council was not supportive of the recommendation for the following reasons, being bang, 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 bang.
Can I just ask a point of clarification then? Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, but they have to be planning reasons.
Look, I would advocate that they need to be sound planning reasons, but there's been a number of reasons raised by the community and raised by councillors today that are very relevant to the determination of the application. For example, if you're of the view that the landscaping condition that was contemplated was not adequate to address the visual impact issue, where you could. That's an issue for you to actually raise, or for the council to actually articulate out on.
Okay, but it's being raised either way, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay.
Let's get a point of clarification then. Part of giving consent, or council saying it complies, I should say, complies. How do you get around it being within 5 kilometres of the residential zone then? Because it's within 5 kilometres, and by the government's own media release, they're saying, well, okay, it should be outside that, but we're inside that. I'm trying to understand how you're saying it complies if it's within that 5 kilometres.
Go to my notes here. So, as I mentioned to you before, when we considered the development application out to the west of the city, there was no such consideration of how a development may have affected a growth centre of the city as such, and it was raised that how do these developments start to encroach upon our regional cities and the impact that they might have on the future growth needs of the city. So clause 2.42 of the SEP requires the consent authority, amongst a number of other things there, to it's located to it's unlikely to have a significant adverse impact on the region's city's capacity for growth is one requirement, and the city quality and landscape character is the other. With regards to the capacity of growth, the planning assessment report goes to that particular issue insofar as that we've got a housing strategy that's been identified by the city for the next 20 years, by the council for the next 20 years, and it has prognosis as to where it anticipates its future residential development going. To the south is the water catchment land, and traditionally council have not gone anywhere near the water catchment for very good reasons. We've got to protect our asset for our drinking water supply. So as we go further, council made strong decisions that we don't go any further south of the Hawke Lane, even though there is some opportunity for some rural land in that precinct there before it rolls into the catchment. So our planning assessment and answering the impact that this development might have on the capacity growth is around the council's adopted strategic strategies for growth over the next 20 years. Acknowledging that particular plan is reviewed on a 5-yearly basis as to determine where we might want to go next. If we start going into the water catchment, there's a whole lot of other issues associated with facilitating residential development in those areas. So on that basis, the land is not anticipated to be needed for residential development in the foreseeable future, and that's hence why the reason why our planning staff have made that recommendation in relation to it. I'm not aware of a 5 kilometre or 10 kilometre radius or anything under the current planning controls. But that particular clause requires us. So if we're dealing with the one out here that is within one of our growth strategies, it'd be a key consideration as to why we wouldn't be supporting it now. But at the end of the day, at the time which that development application was considered, this was not a requirement, and we took legal advice on the issue at the time, recognising that the state policy has its renewable energy zones, but the state policy also gives permissibility to this type of development right across the water catchment and all other rural lands across New South Wales, basically. And they said those large-scale residential, large-scale guidelines that were referred to relates to development that's state significant, which is anything over a $30 million infrastructure, $30 million proposal as such, which obviously on a broader scale what we're talking about at the moment. And then the second part of that consideration was the landscape quality. We recognise that this assessment that there's certainly some visual impacts that must be addressed. The visual impacts have been addressed through recommended conditions of consent, which have been disputed by the neighbours there about whether or not that's actually going to be adequate. How long does it take to establish? Many years, perhaps in some circumstances for something to be meaningful to actually eliminate. So there's a short-term or a medium-term level of impact that might be considered. So that sort of, I guess both those elements have been addressed in the plenary report. It's as to whether or not the council agrees with the actual position that we've taken on those issues.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to the director, and just noting the commentary around a few of the councillors and also our guest here today that have spoken. We've got a solar farm that we're talking about. Now, I walk around town. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of solar all on these houses. What's the difference between that out there than they're here? And in relation to the 80s, which I was here, when they smashed down the new big dome in the glass there, when these big hailstones, what if it did, God forbid, that we don't have a disaster from above, smash all of these, ends up, where does that water end up?
Where's the water?
All of the damage of the actual thing, because they're talking about, a lot of people are talking about, well, if it smashes all the actual solar, you know, so we got solars all over the town, including on Orange City Council building.
Yeah.
So we're talking about contamination out there. Well, what's the contamination going to happen to the city if it's so happen? Or is there different solar?
Oh, I think they're all probably in the same. But there's a different issue that the council raised here in terms of if there's an impact upon a solar panel and what impact does that directly have on the ground and the land as such as a result of that impact occurring, as opposed to one that impacts on the top of a roof system. But at the end of the day, essentially, if we are unfortunate enough to have those sort of impacts on the city from an unforeseen weather impact, you know, we need to deal with the waste and deal with the waste through. I guess I take that particular issue through our waste manager as to whether there's any ability for us to deal with them here, or I think there's a lot of work being done at the moment in relation to businesses that are dealing with that particular waste, as such replacement of those panels and moving them on and recycling them and whatever they're doing. But from a perspective, we can only deal with the application that's on our books at the moment. We've got conditions in there about waste management plans during construction. We've got a decommissioning plan requirement as a recommended condition at the end of the 35 years that needs to be signed off as to how they're going to go about bringing this site back to its current position at the end of the 35-year tenure. So.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, sir. I suppose in relation to the question around the development of Orange, and I appreciate your commentary, sir, in relation to that's our water feeder out there, and we're not going to go on there, which I kind of knew that anyhow. But because we've got Redmond Place out here, 300 homes.
Yeah.
Over here, Charles Sturt University, we've got a dump of homes going over there.
Yeah.
We've got a heap of homes going over this side.
Yeah.
It's going to take us way beyond my time. I'll be buried up here by the time this all comes around. So I just don't see some of the logic, and that's why I'm speaking against the rescission motion. I think the report that has come here, I've read it 3 times now, 300 pages, and understanding it. Sure, there's some parts might be missing out, but I've read reports before where some points aren't within it, but every aspect of it, including the Indigenous aspect of it, with Land Council being involved in relation to making sure that that area there has no significant for the Raji people. I think I got no issues with it. So I'm voting against the rescission motion. But I appreciate the work and your commentary to everybody concerned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mallard.
Yeah, question through you, Mayor. Particularly going to the issue, I appreciate people doing work on rehabilitation and revegetation, and that question of, is there anything in the planning laws that would allow the solar farm, if it's installed, to attempt to prevent someone planting and growing trees on neighbouring land because of concerns about shading of the solar panels?
I'm not aware of any impacts or legislative requirements associated around that. I mean, I take the point that one of the speakers raised, that if planted out a particular area that may have that potential impact. That's a negotiation between two property owners at the time. If it happens to impact upon a development, they could talk about it. But both property owners have every right to plant trees where they'd like to plant trees on the land. We don't require development sector planting of trees in anywhere. So, albeit that it's associated with this development to respond to a particular issue, I'm not aware of any issue that would affect that, or any common law issue as to why to prevent the neighbour from planting what he's actually done in terms of enhancing his property the way in which he'd like to.
Thank you.
Just as a question.
Yes, Councillor.
Question, Director. Just in relation to what Councillor Power said, he was going to that, I do believe that West Orange and probably the new development out near the CSU aren't in the water catchment areas. They don't run into Gosling or Spring Creek or Suma Park Dam. Is that correct? I know they're part of our
drinking water,
stormwater harvesting, but that's also tested. That was
all of the sites currently listed under our housing strategy are located outside of the water catchment, except for River Plots.
Thank you.
Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Mallard.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm speaking. I can't support the rescission motion. I thank the staff for taking the time to go through things and answer so many questions. I thank the speakers for coming and sharing their concerns, some of which I do share, and I think we're dealing with, as Councillor Kinghorn noted, the existing motion that we resolved to pass said that we are going to express some concerns, and I think particularly issues that we've now covered a couple of times around concerns about the adequacy of the screening, on-site existing contamination, ensuring that's dealt with. I absolutely take on board that those concerns need to be addressed, and that we ask the panel to take that into consideration in any conditions they put if they do issue final approval. At the same time, there's a lot of people have been saying they're not against renewables. I'm going to say I am absolutely for renewables, and I am for climate action, and I recognise that we need to be moving and rolling out renewable energy infrastructure in ways and in places that they don't already exist. And yes, that's going to cause discomfort. Yes, it's going to cause opposition and concern, and I can understand for neighbours that it's changing things. And I can't agree with what at least one speaker said, which is that the development should have no impact for it to go ahead. We don't look at residential developments in that way. We don't look at other projects in that way. We deal with a number of different areas where you might have a project. I can think of social housing proposals, for example, where, yes, there's a strong local concern and backlash. And you get a mix of legitimate concerns and illegitimate concerns come up in those sorts of debates. We've seen very similar today. There have been some alarmist statements and some concerns about things that just don't make sense and aren't backed up by evidence. And you can go looking at this already. There's plenty of legitimate information out there dealing with these things. Councillor Power, just to address some of what I was going to point out, like talking about, is this right for Orange? Does solar fit with our image? The data, the Australian PV Institute data shows 7,364 installations of solar in Orange. That is estimated to be around 37.3% of houses. So 1 in 3 homes already has solar on the rooftop. They're getting hit by hailstorms. Their water's flowing off them and going into drinking water ultimately. This is an industry that is new, and it's particularly new to being rolled out in rural areas, but it's an industry that has now decades of history in this country and across the world, and it's an industry that is delivering the emissions reductions that we need as well. I talked at the last time around that I can't accept this argument that everything needs to happen in renewable energy zones. I understand the intention of renewable energy zones to drive the large-scale infrastructure for generation and transmission that we need, but the reality again is, to make the rapid change we need to address climate change, we need to embrace renewables and install more of it in our area, and that will actually be consistent with what we want to be as a modern, innovative region and city. So I also, we've had a couple of times this 5 kilometre, 10 kilometre thing come up. I think Councillor Duffy referred to it, and you as well, Mayor. And I know you were reading from the original media release. We've covered this before. Councillor Duffy brought it up earlier in the year when he was asking a question, and I went and looked at it after that and came back and reported it back to the following meeting. That was the original policy proposal when the government put out an explanation of intended effect of the regulatory changes they were proposing to make. They didn't implement it in that way. And what they did implement is addressed, and Mr Johnston has already referred to it. Page 33 of our papers for today's meeting, it was page 109 in the original report there. The changes that were made to the State Environmental Planning Policy, Transport and Infrastructure 2021 for electricity generating works or solar energy systems. And instead it was areas that are marked as being on a regional cities map. But you can read right there that the staff assessment has considered those things and provided a response to.
Councillor Miller, I just need an extension. Councillor Power, thank you. Continue.
Thanks. Yep. Yeah, so those issues have been addressed, and I agree with the assessment of them. I disagree with the assertion that we might see our city growing out that way, and that's why we shouldn't be wanting a solar farm out there. And I think, you know, if we were looking at residential development extending out that way, I would suggest we're doing urban planning incredibly wrong. We adopted a local housing strategy a few years ago that didn't have it on the radar, as Mr Johnston explained, with very good reasons, and we've drawn that boundary. But we need to be stopping and slowing the urban encroachment into rural areas. We need to be getting better at doing density well. I'm still looking forward to, at some point when we get work on the infill development policy that we talked about, we resolved to work on when we adopted that local housing strategy in 2022, because I think we've got to balance conserving the heritage and character of the city with providing the homes that we need within our existing boundaries as much as possible. Yeah, look, I won't say much more than that. I want to thank, I know there has been a lot of work going into this assessment. I do still think there's some discussion needed around some of the specific conditions, and I think the planning panel can give consideration to that. And I think the resolution we've already got fits with us highlighting those issues, while also acknowledging that this development does fit with the the planning requirements, which acknowledge, again on page 33, acknowledge that development of solar energy systems is permissible on any land provided it complies with those conditions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy, do you want to sum up?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said, if this rescission motion is successful, I'll be moving the resolution. The council cannot support the project, as I explained a little bit earlier. And I'd also like to include in that the issues of the guidelines, the contamination and procedural fairness, and the growth of the city as issues that we think there's no that we put forward to the panel. There is no harm in the council having a different opinion to what the staff have. I explained that before as regards to a previous development that came in here to this thing, and it was sorted out by the courts. But I see no harm in us councillors supporting our ratepayers. There was 40 to 41 against the project, and there was only one, which is an organisation which is noted as a green organisation and perceived as a green organisation around the city. And but again, as I said, this is a situation where you're encroaching on the rural landscape of the area in a water catchment zone, and that's why I propose, if this rescission was successful, that we move the resolution which I and Mr McFall read out earlier, which was under the guidance of a senior planner that has been a senior planner and involved heavily in private industry as well, as we to say, look, we object to this process. And I urge the panel to look at the reasons why they refused the one in the solar panel one in Mudgee, which it didn't meet the requirements of in the catchment zone as well over there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. No further speakers? Okay. I'll now put the motion, a show of hands for the rescission motion. What's Councillor Peterson doing there? His hands up?
Yeah, hand up.
Okay, so we've got 3 on screen with hands up, and in the chamber we've got 3, so that's 6. And those against? 4 against. And Councillor Steadman left, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. So now the rescission motion is successful. Councillor Duffy, we now need you to move a new motion, and it'll be debated on and voted on.
Yes, I move the motion that council cannot support the project, and we should formally advise the panel that council is not satisfied with the proposed condition 11 of the draft notice of approval can achieve its purpose to ensure quality rural setting for the development which complements the surrounding environment due to the low-lying nature of the land, affecting parts of the site where landscaping is proposed to mitigate the impact of surrounding lands and public roads. And also we're asking the panel to, as reasons, we're looking at the actual issues of contamination, city growth, the procedural fairness when we look at the actual things that were advertised, and the public community is not for it. They're saying no, we don't want it. As I said, 40 to 1 was against it.
Councillor Duffy, I'm happy to second it. I'm just curious about the words procedural fairness, what you mean by that.
Well, what I mean by procedural fairness was that the information wasn't readily available to the general public nor us as councillors. It was available. You had to put in a GEPA to get it, and that's what my understanding is there. But I mean, again, the decision will be made by the planning panel itself. But our main interest, as far as I'm concerned, as we tell the planning panel, we don't want it as a council, and our ratepayers don't want it as a council. That's what council to support it. So, and that's what it is, and it doesn't meet that. I wouldn't like to wake up every morning and find out there's 30 acres or 10 acres of in front of me every morning when I wake up.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to second it unless there's somebody else wants to do it. Okay, so we've got a new motion. So we'll now vote on any speakers on the new motion. Yes, Councillor Roddy.
Just Just a quick one. I do have some slight concerns about the mention of procedural fairness, saying that the information wasn't out there because it did go out for consultation for 30 days. So that part of Councillor Duffy's motion concerns me because it's not true. If we take that to the planning panel and say the information wasn't out there, it was.
Yes. Unless you want to withdraw that and proceed.
Yeah, I'm happy to drop it off.
Okay, we'll get rid of that.
People will bring it up.
Good point. Thank you. Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like maybe through the CEO to find out, with planning training all along, we've been told that if you have an objection, it has to be on planning grounds. There's been one that Councillor Duffy's just raised from today, and all of the other things that were raised when I spoke to Mr. Johnston, he's addressed them all, saying that they've been adequately addressed. So where do we stand not following something when it meets the criteria? Is that?
Bring you, Mr. Mayor, but councillors are able to make those decisions that support what staff are put forward, and it's really a moot point in this particular instance because it's not our decision to make.
Okay, so because we're not actually giving the final approval, then there's no avenue to, there's no recourse through the courts.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further speakers? There being none, I'll now put the motion. Show of hands for. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4. Those against, 2 against. The amendment now becomes the motion. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you all for your patience. The meeting's closed at 1:52 p.m.